a project for me. So that was great. Um, we're in a new study, as I mentioned. It's going to be called Opening the Door, right? Open the Door. And the whole context of this study is how often we find ourselves before doors. And doors here is like a metaphor, right, for decisions that need to be made. In my sermon this past week, I talked about various kinds of doors that we encounter throughout our life. Remember when you were younger and you were graduating from high school and you were wondering what you were going to do with your life, right? What if you were going to go to college? What college? What were you going to do for work? Where would this life bring you? I mean, so many unanswered questions. And then you graduate. Now you're finding a full-time job. Maybe you're involved in a relationship. Is it time to take this next step? Is it time to get married? Is it time to start a family? Do we move? Do I take another job opportunity? Life brings with it a series of these kinds of doors. And sometimes we can be paralyzed by those decisions, right? We stand before the open door and we're overwhelmed because we don't really know what's on the other side. And we decide maybe I'm going to play my options a little safe. But in playing it safe, what do? We wind up choosing no option. And that in itself is unacceptable. I mean, think about it. I've heard a lot of times I get in conversations with some of these younger guys and they'll tell me, well, I'm just trying to keep my options open. So I said, okay, keeping your options open. So let's say you have 4 options and all those doors are open, but you haven't walked through any of them. So you really don't have any options because you haven't taken any. You think that you have all these options, but you don't because you haven't walked through any of those doors. It's only when you walk through some doors that then it's decision time. Well, that wasn't a good door. I have to pick another one, right? This was a great decision. Sometimes you walk through doors and what you think you're going to find is something entirely different. Case in point, right? I was an accountant by trade. I come to know Jesus. I decide, yeah, it's time for me. I need to discover more about what this faith is all about. And so for me, that meant I left my job and I went to Philadelphia to go to receive a seminary education. And I took a job working at the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia. And lo and behold, if one night I was working 4 to 12 midnights and I was going to school from 8 to 2. So 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon was school. And then I had this evening job working at the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia. So one day after work, I leave. I go to get a Philadelphia cheesesteak, and I stop in at a place that was open late, and there were a bunch of nurses that had just finished the shift at the hospital, and lo and behold, I met Cindy. So when I walked through the door to go to seminary, I went there. I went through that door to get a seminary education. I didn't realize that walking through that door was also going to open up this door for me to meet my future wife. And here we're going to be married 41 years in May. So walking through a door, it may not always tell the whole story. Sometimes, I'm sure you've had these experiences in your life. You were invited somewhere and what you went to that event for is not what you left with. You may have made a contact for another job, right? You may have made a brand new friend, maybe a family, and that family has children, and those children have become the best friends to your kids. I mean, that's how this life works. So the open door idea is it's always a place of decision. God is asking us to kind of walk through these doors. But Jesus has been, throughout this Gospel of Matthew, trying to give us more and more insight about what it means to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. And he keeps on revealing more and more and more. In the beginning, it was his teaching, right? The miracles that just seemed to attract people. And Jesus called 12 of those to be his apostles, right? And they're now coming alongside Jesus, seeing him in all kinds of settings. And finally, it gets to the point where Jesus said to them, okay, who do men say that I am? And they began to give him all the scuttlebutt on what people were saying about him. But then Jesus turned the tables and said, who do you say that I am? And at that juncture, they went from what everybody else had to say to now out of their own convictions. And Peter, speaking for the group, says, you are the Son of the living God. Jesus praises him. And then, no sooner that he does that, but he makes this announcement. He says to them that the Son of Man must go to Jerusalem. And when he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to suffer many things by the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law. He's going to be betrayed. He'll be killed, but on the third day he will rise from the dead. And the disciples, their initial reaction is, no way. See, they're seeing in Jesus this promised Messiah that had been promised for generations and generations. They're seeing in Jesus one who is going to bring redemption, reconciliation, the hard times that we endure, this broken world of which we are part. The promises were always that the Messiah would come and set everything right. So how is it that the Messiah, that this Son of the living God, is going to come and suffer at the hands of the evil that we find in this world? They just could not fathom that. And as a result, resisted that. But Jesus goes on to tell them and says, listen, everyone who follows after me must deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me. Because that's what Jesus did. Jesus, it says he left that throne of glory and he took upon himself the form of a servant, appearing as a man, and then became obedient to this word of God, his Father, and became obedient to the point of death on a cross, by which that cross purchased the redemption that the world so desperately needed, and through the power of his resurrection gave us a hope of a life abundant. So Jesus knows what he's doing. In fact, all of the Old Testament also gave witness to that this was the way. People pick and choose sometimes, what we want to hear. But it was always in that Old Testament that the Lamb of God would come and bear the iniquities of his people. That he would be rejected. Throughout the Psalms, right? Throughout the books of history, you find this everywhere you go. I mean, think about it. In the very opening chapters of Genesis, when the fall happens and God is about to judge not only Satan but Adam and Eve, what does he say? He says that Satan would be cursed. He says, and the woman's seed, that Satan would strike him on the heel, but he would crush his head. I mean, so in this garden, there is an allusion to this conflict that's going to exist between this evil that's now present in the world and this Redeemer that God is going to send. He would crush him, he would bite him on the heel, but he would crush his head. I heard a preacher one time talked about it. He says, just when Satan sticks his neck out, God stomps on it. And that's exactly what happens here. All the conniving, all the events that are taking place, they think they're going to put Jesus in a bad situation, not recognizing that Jesus has come to give his life a ransom for the sins of men. That God so loved the world that he would give his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. See, that's the gospel. Jesus, so when he tells his disciples, this is the way of the cross is the way of redemption. And just as I am submitting to the will of my Father, I'm asking you to deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow after me. It's hard, right? The disciples, they don't really get it. And yet, Jesus will remind them of that 2 or 3 different times. And every time, what is he doing? He is inserting this idea into their heads because he wants us to think differently. See, one of the things that I hope that you're getting through in Matthew's gospel is that Jesus is constantly taking us deeper and deeper and deeper into what it means to be a follower of Christ, right? What it means to be a citizen of this kingdom of heaven. And it's not always what we think. And so one of the things that we're going to take a look at is this whole idea of various topics now that are going to take place. So today, being Monday, February 27th, I'm going to take you through a passage that we find in Matthew 19, verses 1 through 15. And the question that I want to address with you today and throughout this week is, how are we to live in a broken world? See, I think that you're going to find numerous examples beginning here at Matthew 19, where Jesus is going to begin to address various kinds of topics. And he's going to give us, from his perspective, how we are to maneuver, how we are to live in the midst of all of this. And so I'd like to take you to Matthew chapter 19, and have you just look at this passage with me. It starts off with Jesus saying, in Matthew 19, verse 1, it says that Jesus had finished saying these things. Well, what are the things that he has been saying? If you remember, when we go back to looking at Matthew chapter 18, weren't there 2 things that really stuck out to you and me? It was all about humility, and it was about forgiveness. Remember, in the very beginning of Matthew chapter 18, Jesus brings out this little child and says that the kingdom of heaven is made up of little ones just like this. And it becomes an illustration that Jesus is going to use. But what's the illustration? The illustration is not just of little children, because Jesus then turns to his disciples and he says to them, unless you change and become like one of these, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And he speaks then about the humility that's found in these children. They're open to being instructed, right? To being guided. And he's saying, so it needs to be with you. If you're going to be a child of God, then you need to be instructed by God. It needs to show that you're there. And then what does the text say? The text says that God is always looking, for his children. That he's saying that he's always having their back. That it would be that whoever does harm to one of his children, it'd be better if they were thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck. And then he tells this quick little story about a shepherd who left 99 to search after the one who was lost. And when he found it, he was so overjoyed because the lamb was lost. That's why he came, right? To rescue, the perishing. And so Jesus comes, gives that little story to show the extent to which God will go for his loved ones. But I think it's interesting then that from there, Jesus turns the table, right? And he says, hey, what do you do when your brother sins against you? And he gave us those steps of reconciliation, about the way in which we are to pursue this kind of reconciliation and forgiveness. He says you got to go to your brother, and if he doesn't listen, you got to bring witnesses to confirm the facts. And if he doesn't listen to them, then you should enlist the help of the surrounding community of believers to try to speak some sense into the situation. And if he doesn't listen to them, then you treat them as those who have not yet been convinced by God's grace. You're not to just shun them, but you realize that the words aren't going to be enough. The confrontation is not enough. The Holy Spirit is going to be the one that's going to have to bring that level of conviction. So all of this was in Matthew 18, ending with the story of a master who forgives this insurmountable debt to a servant, only to have that servant walk out freed from the burden of never being able to pay this debt. He goes, finds a servant that owes him a few bucks, and winds up throwing that servant into prison. So when the master finds out, he calls that other servant back in and says, listen, I forgave you all this debt. Are you so wicked? He says, he throws him in prison until he can pay the whole debt, which is basically saying he's in there forever because he can never pay the amount that was owed. So see, this story is then talking to you and me about a grace of God that you and I are receiving that should then make us very, very sensitive to those who are around us, who are in need of that grace. Just the way God is going out and pursuing us, he wants us to go out now as the light of the world, the salt of the earth, and pursue those in this world as well, so that our actions would be a witness that we truly are part of God's family. And that means that sometimes people are going to insult you. They're going to, falsely accuse you of things. Like, it's not going to be pleasant. But again, think about this role that Jesus played. Did people, they were constantly contentious to him, to the point where we read, right, way back in Matthew chapter 12, that the religious leaders of the day, they've already formed such an opinion of Jesus that they're out to kill him. They're plotting now to kill him. And that's going to happen when Jesus arrives in Jerusalem. So I just give you that quick little backdrop, because this is what was being spoken, right? So in verses 1 and 2, it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, all about living with humility and really seeking to be reconciled to the world around you, Jesus leaves there, and then he goes down to Galilee. He left Galilee, and he went into the region of Judea, to the other side of the Jordan. Judea is a surrounding community where the city of Jerusalem is found. So this is saying that they're on a road trip now. The disciples are on their way, and they're making their way down to Jerusalem. And along the way, look at verse 3. It says, some Pharisees came to him to test him. Now, that should automatically put some flags up in your head. They're here to do what? They're here to put Jesus in a very bad way. Jesus is on the road to Jerusalem. He already said what's going to await him there, right? He's going to be betrayed. He's going to suffer many things by the hands of the religious establishment. And sure enough, they're coming out full force, and here they want to trip him up. And why? Did you read at the end of verse 2 when it said that the large crowds followed Jesus and he healed them there? So the crowds are swelling. People are looking to Jesus, and the Pharisees, motivated a great deal by envy, jealousy, they want to take Jesus down. They're not in agreement with this good news that Jesus has been sharing. They want to silence that voice. And so as a result, they come to Jesus to trip him, to test him. And um, and they want to know, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Now, this is the topic here, right? Is about divorce and the you know the conditions for that. They want to know if it's lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason. Now, again, you hear this text, and you would think that someone was asking Jesus a question about marriage and divorce to find out, like, hey, like if we were in a Bible study, right? You're in a Bible college or something, and the topic of marriage and divorce comes up, and now we're going to search the scriptures to find out, what the answer is to this. But that's not the case here. See, the case here is that what do they come? They've come to test Jesus. That word test is to try him, right? They want to put him in a bad light. And so we know then their motivations are very deceitful. They're being devious here. The form of the question then is suspect. Notice that it says here, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? They already have their opinions about this, as we're going to see in a short while. But they're going to come and they're going to ask him this question. But notice it says, for any and every reason. And so that's kind of a suspect. Like, what are you expecting Jesus to answer? Well, for that any and every reason, what I want you to know is that there's some history here. During the days of Jesus, there were a number of different kinds of rabbis that had schools, like the students that would be a part of them. Think of like a mentor, and they would mentor these younger, rabbinical students. And there were two that history bears out as having quite a following. One was a rabbi by the name of Hillel, and another rabbi by the name of Shammai. And so Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, they were at disagreements over a correct interpretation of a passage that's found in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1. In that passage, Moses gives permission for a husband to divorce his wife for anything indecent. And so the anything indecent, it became a point of debate. What does it mean for anything indecent? And think about it in our days today, right? Where you sign a contract and then lawyers go after every little phrase in that document, looking for a loophole. Well, come on, the heart of man doesn't change. It's always the same. They're looking for a loophole here. And why are they why are they why are people looking for this loophole? Well, the historical context for this is that Rabbi Shammai, in that phrase, anything indecent, Shammai placed the emphasis on the indecent part. And so he took that to mean, a behavior that broke the marriage covenant. So for him, it became sexual unfaithfulness. Rabbi Hillel, placed the emphasis on the anything. And there are interpretations of Old Testament. They call it the Mishnah. The Mishnah, Mishna, were interpretations of the Old Testament. And one of those interpreters that wrote, hey, he said you could divorce your wife even for as trivial an offense as a wife burning her husband's food. So, think about this. This gets to be ridiculous. But these two schools, one is saying the emphasis is on the anything. The other one is saying no, it has to be indecent. And they're going back and forth. So why am I telling you this? because these Pharisees are trying to test Jesus. They want to put Jesus in a bad light. They want to present him in a bad way. It's just like in the days in which we're living now, right? When the world comes alongside you and they ask you theological questions, not so much because they want the answer, but because they know that the answer is not in keeping with the way in which the world is moving. So when you say that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but by him, what's the criticism? Oh, those Christians, they're so narrow-minded. They think they're the only ones that have the truth. All you have to do is be a good person. And next thing you know, they are not only redefining the good news that Jesus has shared, but you are being persecuted because you're holding onto this biblical truth that they have already rejected. So it's no different. Don't you see, like in this day, people are arguing about these finer aspects of the law, and they want to put Jesus right in the middle of that debate. And I think because the text says that they're here to test Jesus, they're doing it so that they could discredit him before all of those that were around him. There's one more thing, too, that I want you to recognize as we're going through this passage here, and that is that where Jesus is now, it was not far from where John the Baptist was beheaded. You remember the stories that we shared about John the Baptist. This forerunner to Jesus who was preparing this way. But John the Baptist went up against one of the sons of Herod and told him that it was unlawful for him to have his father's wife. And what was the result of that? John the Baptist was beheaded. And he was beheaded by Herod Antipas. So this was now the political arm. So this idea of divorce was a very sensitive subject. It wound up putting John in prison. It wound up John having his head cut off. Pharisees, I think if I could put Jesus in that bad light, if I can paint this picture of Jesus on this subject of divorce here in the same way, maybe we could put him at odds not only with the religious community but also with the political community, ensuring that we're going to silence his voice once and for all. You see, that's why I'm telling you that the Pharisees' deceitful motives and the way in which they're asking this question and the historical background here, all of this is warning us against the notion that Jesus is going to give them some comprehensive, address on marriage and divorce. All they're trying to do is put Jesus in a bad light, using a topic that's very sensitive, and yet Jesus is going to answer that question in a wonderful way. And we're going to look at that tomorrow. So you come back and we'll work our way through these passages. But I just wanted to give you the setting here, because if we don't get this right, we're going to look at this passage in I believe in a wrong way. And I think a lot of hurt has been visited upon people because people have come down too hard using this passage. So, looking forward to tomorrow. Trust that you guys have a great day, and Lord willing, we'll spend some more time tomorrow. So grateful to be with you today on Monday, February 27th, and we'll spend some more time tomorrow. God bless. Remember, God is good all the time.